over 60. These 7 foods may cut heart disease risk by 50%. Why supplements aren't enough. If you are over 60 and taking calcium every single day to protect your bones, stop for just 5 seconds. Because what I'm about to tell you may completely change the way you think about calcium, osteoporosis, and even heart disease forever. What if the very supplement millions of older adults trust every morning to prevent broken bones is quietly ending up somewhere it should never be? Not in your bones, but in your arteries, around your heart, and even on the delicate valves that keep blood flowing through your body every second of every day. It sounds impossible. After all, calcium is supposed to strengthen bones, right? That is what we have all been told for decades. Drink milk. Take calcium tablets. Protect your skeleton. Yet doctors are seeing something deeply unsettling happen in aging adults all over the world. Weakening bones and hardening arteries at the exact same time, inside the exact same body. And perhaps the most surprising part of all? Many of these people did everything they were told to do. They took the supplements. They followed the advice. They tried to stay healthy. So why are their bones still fragile while their arteries quietly become stiff like concrete? Before we begin, welcome to the channel. My name is Dr. David, and here we talk about healthy aging, stronger bones, better heart health, memory, energy, and practical science-backed habits that help adults over 50 stay healthier, stronger, and more independent for longer. If you care about aging well, take 1 second right now to subscribe and turn on notifications because every week we uncover health truths most people wish they had learned years earlier. And before we dive into today's topic, I want to ask you something simple. What age are you watching from today, and do you currently take calcium supplements? Tell me in the comments below because your story may help someone else watching this video too. Now, let me start with something that might surprise you. For nearly 40 years, most people have believed a very simple idea. Bones weaken with age because they lose calcium, therefore taking more calcium must naturally strengthen them. It sounds logical, almost too logical. But biology does not always behave according to simple logic. The human body is not a machine where you pour something in and automatically get the result you expect. In fact, the body is incredibly selective about what goes where, especially when it comes to calcium. And over the last 15 years, researchers have begun asking some uncomfortable questions about calcium supplementation. Not calcium from food, but concentrated calcium tablets taken every single day. One large analysis published in a respected medical journal reviewed data from more than 11,000 people and found something that raised serious concern. People taking calcium supplements above roughly 1 gram a day, especially without vitamin D, appeared to have about a 30% higher risk of heart attack compared with those who did not. Think about that for a moment. A supplement taken to protect health, potentially linked to increased cardiovascular risk in certain situations. Naturally, researchers wanted answers. Was calcium somehow harmful? Should people stop taking it altogether? Well, the truth is more complicated than that. Because calcium itself is not the enemy. Your body absolutely needs calcium. Your muscles need it. Your nerves need it. Your heart literally depends on it to beat. The real question is not whether calcium matters. The real question is this: where exactly is calcium going once it enters your body? Because around the same time researchers noticed concerns about heart risk, another large review of studies found something equally surprising. Calcium supplements often had only a small or sometimes barely noticeable effect on preventing fractures in many older adults living independently. In other words, the supplement people were taking specifically to prevent broken bones did not always seem to be working the way everyone expected. And that raises a difficult question. If the calcium is not consistently helping the bones, where is it going? Here is the part most people never hear. Calcium in the human body is one of the most tightly controlled minerals we have. Your body cannot tolerate too much or too little floating around in the bloodstream because even small shifts can affect muscles, nerves, blood vessels, and even the rhythm of your heart. So when you swallow a calcium tablet, your body does not simply say, "Wonderful, let us send this straight to the bones." No, instead, your body immediately begins trying to regulate that calcium because free calcium in the bloodstream can become dangerous if it is not carefully managed. Ideally, calcium travels into the skeleton where special cells help build and strengthen bone tissue. But calcium cannot guide itself. cannot decide its own destination. It needs biological traffic signals. It needs instructions. And when those systems are not working properly, something deeply troubling can begin happening quietly over years or decades. Calcium may slowly start settling in places where it absolutely does not belong. I remember treating older patients who came into the emergency department after what should have been harmless accidents. A small slip in the kitchen, missing a step near the front porch, losing balance for only a second, and suddenly there is a fractured wrist, a fractured hip, a fractured spine. Bone scans reveal osteopenia or osteoporosis, meaning the skeleton had quietly weakened for years. But then something else often appeared: chest scans, CT images, X-rays, bright white streaks of calcium sitting in arteries where calcium should never be, deposits lining the aorta, the largest artery in the body, specks of calcium in the coronary arteries feeding blood to the heart. Sometimes even calcium collecting on heart valves that are supposed to remain soft, flexible, and smooth. And suddenly a disturbing pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The bones are losing calcium, while the arteries are gaining calcium. Same body, same person, same time. And once you notice that pattern, one enormous question becomes impossible to ignore. What determines whether calcium strengthens your bones or stiffens your blood vessels? Because maybe the problem was never simply not enough calcium. Maybe the real issue is whether the body knows how to use calcium properly in the first place. And this brings us to one of the most overlooked nutrients in healthy aging, a nutrient most people have barely even heard of: vitamin K2. Now, most people know about vitamin K because they have heard it helps blood clotting. Maybe they remember newborn babies receiving a vitamin K shot after birth. But what most people do not realize is that vitamin K is not just one thing. There are actually different forms: vitamin K1 and vitamin K2. And while they sound similar, they play very different roles inside the body. Vitamin K1, found mostly in leafy green vegetables like spinach and kale, mainly helps with blood clotting. That is the one most people recognize. But vitamin K2 may be doing something entirely different, and potentially incredibly important as we age, because K2 appears to play a major role in calcium management. In simple terms, it may help direct calcium toward places where calcium belongs, and away from places where calcium can become dangerous. Imagine calcium as bricks arriving at a construction site. You want those bricks strengthening the walls of a house, reinforcing the structure, making it stronger and safer. What you absolutely do not want is those same bricks dumped randomly into the driveway, blocking entrances, damaging plumbing, and creating problems everywhere they land. This is essentially the calcium problem happening inside many aging bodies. Calcium itself is not bad. In fact, calcium is essential. But when it ends up in the wrong place, it becomes part of the problem rather than the solution. And this is where vitamin K2 becomes incredibly interesting. Because inside your body exist two powerful proteins that act almost like calcium traffic controllers. The first is called osteocalcin. Think of osteocalcin as the worker responsible for strengthening your bones. When activated properly, it helps bind calcium into the bone matrix, the structural material that gives bones strength and density. In simple language, it helps pull calcium into your skeleton where it belongs. The second protein is called matrix GLA protein, often shortened to MGP. And this one may be even more important for your heart and arteries. MGP acts almost like a biological shield, helping discourage calcium from settling into artery walls and soft tissues. You can think of it as the security guard standing outside your blood vessels saying, "Calcium does not belong here." But here is the catch. Neither of these proteins works properly unless vitamin K2 activates them. Without enough K2, osteocalcin struggles to guide calcium into bone tissue. At the same time, matrix GLA protein becomes less effective at keeping calcium away from arteries. Suddenly, the exact pattern doctors see every day begins making terrifying sense. Bones becoming weaker while arteries become harder. Both problems happening at the same time, driven by the same biological misdirection. And this is not just theory or internet wellness talk. Some of the strongest long-term population research we have found something fascinating. In one major European study following thousands of adults for many years, researchers observed that people consuming the highest amounts of vitamin K2 had roughly 50% lower risk of dying from cardiovascular disease compared with those consuming the least. Even more surprising, they also showed around 25% lower risk of dying from any cause overall. But here is something especially interesting. Vitamin K1, the kind found in leafy greens, did not show the same relationship. The protective pattern appeared uniquely connected to K2, and that made researchers ask a bigger question. Could modern diets be quietly starving people of something their bodies once received naturally? Because when you look at how food changed over the last 60 years, something fascinating appears. Many traditional sources of vitamin K2 slowly disappeared from modern eating habits. Fermented foods became less common. Traditional cheeses declined. Animals increasingly shifted from grass-based feeding to grain-heavy industrial systems. Egg yolks became feared. Full-fat dairy became demonized. Entire generations were taught to avoid foods containing natural fats. Suddenly people were eating skim milk instead of traditional dairy. Egg whites instead of whole eggs. Processed low-fat foods filled with sugar instead of real nourishing meals. And here is the irony. Vitamin K2 is fat-soluble, meaning it naturally exists in many of the very foods people became afraid to eat. Things like egg yolks, certain cheeses, fermented foods, some traditional dairy products, and foods from animals raised more naturally. This does not mean people should suddenly eat unlimited butter or giant amounts of cheese every day. That is not the lesson here. The lesson is context. Health is almost never about one food or one nutrient. It is about patterns. But before we get there, we need to understand what actually happens when calcium starts building up where it does not belong, because this is where the story becomes very real. Healthy arteries are supposed to stay flexible. Every time your heart beats, arteries gently expand and relax, helping blood flow smoothly throughout your body. Think of healthy arteries like a flexible garden hose. Soft, elastic, able to adjust to pressure easily. But when calcium slowly begins settling into artery walls over years or decades, those arteries gradually become stiff, hard, less flexible. Suddenly blood has a harder time moving through the system. Blood pressure begins rising, especially systolic blood pressure, the top number that so many adults over 60 notice creeping upward with age. And when arteries stiffen, the heart itself has to work harder to pump blood through the body. Over years, that extra effort may slowly strain the heart muscle. Sometimes people say, "My heart looked normal on the scan, so why do I feel exhausted?" But sometimes the problem is not simply the heart muscle itself. Sometimes it is the system around the heart becoming harder to pump through. Stiff arteries, higher pressure, less flexibility, reduced efficiency. And this brings us to something many older adults have never heard about, but doctors increasingly pay close attention to: coronary artery calcium scoring, often called a CAC score. This is a special CT scan measuring how much calcium has collected inside the arteries around the heart. Why does this matter? Because calcium buildup around the heart can be one of the strongest indicators of future heart attack risk we have. People with little or no calcium often carry dramatically lower risk over the following decade. Meanwhile, very high calcium scores may signal much greater cardiovascular danger. And once again, the lesson becomes crystal clear. Calcium itself is not the problem. Location matters. Calcium in bones is protection. Calcium in arteries is a warning sign. But arteries are not the only place calcium may quietly build up. One of the most vulnerable areas is actually the aortic valve, one of the heart's most important valves, responsible for allowing blood to leave the heart and travel throughout the body. In a healthy person, this valve opens and closes smoothly thousands of times every day without us ever thinking about it. But over time, calcium deposits can begin collecting there too. Gradually, the valve becomes stiff, narrow, less flexible. Doctors call this condition aortic stenosis, and it has become one of the most common heart valve problems in older adults. Many people mistake the symptoms for simple aging, feeling tired more easily, getting short of breath walking upstairs, feeling dizzy or weak. But often the problem is not simply getting older. It is mechanical. a valve literally struggling to open properly because calcium slowly changed its structure over many years. And unfortunately, once severe calcification develops, medication usually cannot reverse it. In many cases, the only true solution becomes replacing the valve entirely, which raises another uncomfortable but important question. If calcium misdirection plays a role in so many age-related problems, why have we spent decades talking only about calcium itself while barely discussing the systems helping direct it? Now, there is another important piece of this story that millions of older adults need to understand, especially if you or someone you love takes blood thinners. Because some medications can unintentionally affect the same calcium-regulating pathways we have been talking about. One of the most commonly prescribed blood thinners for decades has been warfarin, also known as Coumadin. Doctors prescribe it to reduce the risk of dangerous blood clots in conditions like atrial fibrillation, blood clots in the legs, certain stroke risks, or mechanical heart valves. And to be absolutely clear, for many people, these medications are life-saving. Preventing stroke can literally mean the difference between maintaining independence and losing it forever. But here is something many people never hear discussed. Warfarin works partly by blocking vitamin K activity in the body. That is part of how it reduces clotting risk. The problem is that warfarin does not selectively block only one form of vitamin K. It may also interfere with vitamin K2 activity, the very nutrient involved in activating proteins that help manage calcium placement. Some imaging studies have suggested that long-term warfarin users may show higher levels of artery and valve calcification compared with people not taking the medication. Now, I want to be extremely careful here because this is important. Never stop or change a prescribed medication because of something you watched online. Stroke prevention matters enormously, and every patient is different. Many people absolutely need these medications, and treatment decisions should always be made with your physician. But what this research teaches us is something much bigger. The body is deeply interconnected. When we influence one biological pathway, there are often ripple effects somewhere else. And this is one reason newer blood-thinning medications are increasingly common for some patients. Certain newer options work through different mechanisms and may not interfere with vitamin K pathways in the same way. But again, treatment choices belong between you and your doctor, never social media. Now, let us talk about another vitamin almost everyone over 60 has heard of, vitamin D. Most people know vitamin D matters for bone health because it helps your body absorb calcium from food through the intestines and move it into circulation. But here is where things become fascinating. Imagine vitamin D opening the front door and helping calcium enter the bloodstream. Helpful, right? But then what happens next? Who tells calcium where to go? That is where vitamin K2 may become incredibly important. In simple terms, vitamin D may help bring calcium into the body's delivery system, while vitamin K2 may help guide where that calcium ultimately belongs. One helps bring calcium in, the other helps direct traffic. And when you think about it this way, something suddenly becomes obvious. The body does not function through isolated nutrients. It works through partnerships, relationships, systems, which may explain why so many people feel disappointed after years of chasing one magic supplement after another. We keep searching for one miracle pill when biology keeps reminding us that health is built through coordination, not isolation. Let me tell you something I learned after years around older adults. The healthiest, strongest, most energetic people in their 70s, 80s, and even 90s were rarely obsessed with individual supplements. Instead, they focused on routines. Quiet, boring, consistent habits repeated over time. They walked daily. They protected muscle strength. They ate mostly real food. They stayed socially connected. They slept better. They managed stress. They stayed curious. They kept moving. And perhaps most importantly, they treated health as something built daily rather than bought in a bottle. Which brings us to the practical question everyone wants answered. What should older adults actually do? First, stop thinking about health through a single nutrient lens. Strong bones are not just about calcium. Heart health is not just about cholesterol. Blood sugar is not just about avoiding sweets. The body works like an orchestra, not solo performers. Everything talks to everything else. Your muscles protect your bones. Your circulation protects your brain. Your sleep influences hormones. Your diet affects inflammation. Your daily habits shape how quickly or how gracefully you age. And when it comes to food, one pattern consistently stands above almost everything else when researchers study healthy aging: a Mediterranean-style way of eating. Not because it is trendy, not because it is restrictive, but because it repeatedly shows benefits for heart health, circulation, metabolism, inflammation, memory, and longevity all at the same time. Imagine meals centered around vegetables, olive oil, fish, legumes, nuts, seeds, beans, fiber-rich foods, colorful produce, and minimally processed ingredients. Not perfection, not obsession, just consistency. And yes, foods naturally containing nutrients like vitamin K2 may fit into that picture too. Things like eggs, fermented foods, traditional cheeses in moderation, yogurt, and whole foods consumed as part of an overall healthy pattern. The key is context. A food behaves differently inside a healthy lifestyle than inside a diet overloaded with processed foods, refined sugar, poor sleep, inactivity, and chronic stress. That may be one of the greatest misunderstandings in modern nutrition. People fear one food while ignoring the bigger pattern. But your body always sees the pattern. And perhaps this entire conversation is not really about one vitamin at all. Maybe it is about something much bigger. For decades, we have tried to reduce health into single numbers, single nutrients, single pills. Calcium for bones. One medication for blood pressure. One pill for cholesterol. Another for blood sugar. And while modern medicine can absolutely save lives, we sometimes forget that the body evolved to function through relationships. Coactors. Systems working together. Real food. Movement. Sleep. Strength. Community. Sunlight. Rhythm. Everything connected to everything else. I cannot tell you how many older adults I met who were taking 8, 10, even 12 medications, each prescribed for a good reason, each targeting one problem, yet somehow still feeling tired, weak, inflamed, and frustrated. Because treating one number is not always the same thing as supporting the whole person. And perhaps that is the biggest lesson of today. Stop asking only, am I getting enough calcium? Start asking a better question. Am I supporting the entire system that helps my body age well? Because truly healthy aging protects more than one thing at once. The same lifestyle helping your bones may also protect your heart. The same habits supporting circulation may help preserve memory. Better food may improve energy. Better sleep may help blood pressure. Stronger muscles may reduce fracture risk. Everything works together. And if there is one thing I hope you remember after watching this today, it is this: growing older does not automatically mean growing weaker. Aging is not simply something that happens to you. In many ways, it is something you shape through the quiet choices repeated every day. The meals you eat, the walks you take, the sleep you protect, the people you stay connected to, the strength you maintain. Little things become powerful when repeated long enough. So before we finish, I would genuinely love to hear from you. What age are you watching from today? And had you ever heard of vitamin K2 before this video? Do you currently take calcium supplements? Tell me in the comments below, because your story may help someone else who is trying to better understand their own health journey. And if this video helped you see bone health, heart health, and aging in a completely different way, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because every week we share practical, science-based strategies to help adults over 50, 60, and beyond stay healthier, stronger, sharper, and more independent for years to come. Take care of yourself, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next video.